The dog didn't bark. She just stood there in the middle of the road, still as a post, while the hot wind stirred dust around her feet. Her belly hung low, sides heaving with shallow breath, ribs showing through the short matted fur. Car slowed. One honked. She didn't flinch when a truck veered around her. The driver scowled out his window, but the old woman watching from the porch across the field didn't blame him. Most people don't stop for things that look broken. Marla hadn't. It meant to come out that day. The sun was cruel in mid-April. The sky bleached bone-white, and the land around her little farmhouse was already curling into summer too soon. But the sharp knock of wood on wood, her screen door flapping once and settling, had drawn her out. She thought it was the wind at first, but the dog was already there, just beyond the dry ditch, head tilted toward the porch, not pleading, just watching. She was coated in a fine crust of red clay, as though she'd crawled out of the land itself. Marla narrowed her eyes. There was a dark smear along one of her hind legs. Blood not fresh, but not old either. She stepped off the porch, cane tapping against the baked earth. And the dog took a step back, not from fear, exactly, but something like it. Mistrust without anger. Marla knew that feeling. She didn't call to her, didn't use any of those soft coaxing words people think animals like. She just walked, slow and crooked, until the two of them stood 5 feet apart, old woman and heavy-bellied dog, the late afternoon pressing down like a held breath. Finally, the dog sat, then she lay down. As if the conversation was over. By dusk, she was on the porch. By nightfall inside. That was 6 days ago now. The house smelled of warm fur and rain-damp wool. The dog, Marla called her Blue, though there was nothing blue about her, had nested under the old laundry table, dragging in rags and one of Marla's worn sweaters when no one was looking. Her belly moved like something lived beneath it, not just kicking, rolling, shifting, as though something inside her was rearranging itself. On the 7th day, it began. It started with a sound Marla hadn't heard in years. A long, low whine. Not pain, not quite, more like a question. Blue didn't panic. She paced a little, circled the corner of the laundry room, then settled onto her side. Her breathing changed, deep, then sharp, then deep again. The light from the single bulb above made her eyes gleam with something that wasn't fear, just focus. The strange, ancient calm of a creature doing what it must. Marla didn't hover. She sat nearby, a blanket across her lap, one hand resting on her knee, fingers still. The house was so quiet she could hear the old grandfather clock tick in the front room, far down the hall. Then, a sudden stillness. Blue lifted her head, ears flicking. Her breathing had stopped. The whole room seemed to lean forward. A pause, and then movement. Out the first puppy arrived without sound, just a wet shift and a low grunt. Marla leaned slightly, eyes narrowing. It was small, dark, curled in on itself. Blue licked it clean, the motion slow and deliberate. The puppy stirred, tiny paws batting at the air. Another followed, then a third, each one a mirror of the last, slick, fragile, trembling, but it was the fourth that made Marla stand. She heard it before she saw it. A rasping cry, shrill and urgent. Blue went still for half a second. Her body tensed. Then she turned and drew the fourth pup gently toward her. Marla took 2 steps forward, and stopped. It was larger, not just heavier, but longer in the back, thicker around the shoulders, pale in a way that caught the light strangely, almost gray. Its fur was shorter, tighter to the skin. Its face, still not fully formed, still wet with birth, looked too angular. The eyes were sealed shut like the others, but its mouth opened and closed again, as if testing air for the first time. Blue licked it once, then again, then stopped. She pulled her head back just slightly, sniffed again. Marla saw it in her eyes. Hesitation, not rejection, not yet, but confusion. Something was wrong. Another contraction rippled through Blue's body, and she turned her attention back. A fifth came, and a sixth, but Marla couldn't stop watching the fourth. Its limbs moved with jerks too strong for its size. Its small tongue flicked against the blanket. One of the others, the third, curled against it instinctively, but the fourth didn't respond. Then came the sound, low, unformed, not a whimper, a growl, faint, but there. Marla stepped back, not out of fear, not yet, but the kind of instinct that lives in the bones of people who've lived long enough to know that nature is always writing stories we haven't read yet. Blue turned her head again. She wasn't cleaning the fourth pup now, just watching it. Her ears twitched. A deep sound, nearly silent, moved through her throat, half warning, half wonder. The wind picked up outside. Dust tapped against the window glass. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote called once and went quiet. Inside, Blue lay still. The other puppies nestled close to her belly, but the fourth had already rolled a few inches away, alone, squirming eyes, sealed mouth working silently. And for the first time since she arrived, Blue didn't move to bring it back. The pup didn't stop moving. It crawled in small, lurching spirals, not toward warmth or milk like the others, but along the frayed edge of the blanket, snuffling, grunting softly, its limbs twitching with an energy that didn't belong to something just born. Blue watched it for a long time. Her head was low, ears pinned back, not flat, but cautious. Still, she didn't push it away. Not yet. Her breathing was steady, but her eyes never left it. Marla stayed by the doorway, one hand against the frame. She'd seen dogs give birth before, on farms, in fields, under back porches where no one had been kind enough to offer them safety. But this was something else. There was a noise in her chest. She hadn't noticed something between unease and wonder, the kind of silence a person holds when they're not sure what they're praying for. Then came the twitch. The fourth pup's leg jerked in a way the others hadn't. Too stiff, too sharp, not a kick, but a jolt, like something reacting. Blue let what a single low huff, her tail flicking once against the floor, and Marla saw it, finally, in the fur, a patch along the pup's flank that hadn't looked strange at first glance. Now it caught the light differently. The texture was wrong, thinner, lacking the softness of birth. Almost scaled. The wind hit the house again, louder this time. The porch boards groaned. Dust rasped softly against the laundry room window. Something about the sound made Marla's skin tighten along her arms. She stepped closer. Blue didn't stop her, but she didn't look away from the pup either. Marla crouched slowly, knees aching. The pup was near her boot now, small face brushing against the leather as it searched for something. Its movements were urgent, but not clumsy, focused, like instinct already had direction. Easy, she murmured, the word more breath than sound. Blue's head tilted slightly, that same confusion behind her eyes, the kind animals carry when something breaks. The script written into their bones that the pup stopped crawling. It lifted its head, eyes still sealed, nose twitching. Its body leaned toward the scent, Marla's scent, and she felt, absurdly, the urge to pull back. Not out of fear, but something more primitive, recognition of the unknown. Then, a thin mewl, soft, strange, too long in pitch, not distress, something exploratory. Blue stood. The shift in her posture was subtle but immediate. She rose slowly, front paws first, then hind legs. The movement pushed the rest of the litter slightly, their tiny limbs flopping gently against her belly. They whimpered, nuzzled closer, but she didn't lie back down. Her eyes were locked on the fourth pup. Marla rose, too, gripping the table edge for balance. Her back was damp with sweat. She hadn't noticed until now how still the rest of the house had become. The old clock had stopped ticking, or perhaps she'd just stopped hearing it. Blue stepped forward, one paw pressing softly against the blanket. The fourth pup turned toward her, nose up, moving fast now, as if it knew where to go. Blue's lips pulled back, not a snarl, but a baring of teeth. A sound like a breath held too long shuddered in her throat. Then she bent and picked the pup up. She didn't do it gently. Marla took a step forward, unsure of what she'd just seen, but Blue didn't harm it. She didn't shake it or drop it hard. She simply carried it away from the others across the room, to the far corner where the laundry sink used to stand. She placed it there, in the shadow, and returned to her litter. She lay down again, curling tightly around the 6 pups that remained. The fourth made no sound. Marla stood in the doorway for what felt like hours. Her joints stiffened. The light, dimmed as the last of the day, faded from the hallway behind her. She heard nothing now but the tiny clicks and rustles of newborns nursing and that one patch of silence in the corner. It wasn't rejection. That's what struck her most. Blue hadn't cast the pup out. She'd simply relocated it, separated it. A decision made not from anger or panic, but with the calm clarity of a dog that had once survived something we'll never understand. That made Marla more uneasy than anything else. At midnight, she returned with a small towel and a lamp. She didn't speak, didn't coo or whisper, just moved slowly into the room and sat down beside the laundry sink. The pup hadn't moved. It was still breathing. She could see the chest rise and fall, but it was slower now, calmer. The twitching. At start she picked it up, wrapping it loosely in the towel. It didn't resist. Its body was warmer than it should have been, and the skin, especially along the shoulders, felt dense. Not malformed exactly, but not right. Marla stared at it a long time. Her hands didn't tremble. Not yet. Blue watched from across the room, eyes unblinking in the soft lamplight. Outside, the wind had stopped. Not died down, just stopped. The house settled into a different kind of silence. Not uneasy, just waiting. And as Marla leaned back against the wall, cradling the strange pale pup in her arms, something in her remembered the sound of her husband's breathing on his last night, the quiet, final rhythm of something letting go. But this, whatever it was, had just begun. The pup's breathing had shifted. Marla could feel it through the towel, small ribs rising slower now, but deeper, like something had settled inside it. Not peace, not exhaustion, but a strange, quiet concentration, as if the body had finally adjusted to a world it hadn't been built for. She kept her fingers lightly curled around it, careful not to hold too tight. The fur was cool along the edges, but warm where the limbs met the chest. Too warm, a fever warmth maybe, or something older than fever. She couldn't tell. Across the room, Blue hadn't moved. Her head rested flat between her paws, but her eyes remained open, catching the amber spill of the lamplight in strange flickers. She didn't growl, didn't blink, just stared at the bundle in Marla's lap like it had already decided its own fate, and she was merely waiting for the confirmation. It made Marla think of the year the barn cats started disappearing all at once. slowly a shadow crossing the field line, a feathered wing left at the base of the fence, one cat returning with a gash along its flank, like it had brushed up against something that didn't fight with teeth or claws, but with purpose. The coyote theory hadn't held. Not after the prince turned up, not after the chickens stopped laying for days, all huddled in one corner of the coop without reason. Marla blinked the memory away. The pup stirred, a soft sound, not quite a whine, not quite a breath. Its mouth opened briefly, not for milk but for air, and as it stretched, the towel fell loose and exposed more of its flank done in the shadowed light. She saw it clearly now, not a wound, not a deformity, a pattern. Fine, overlapping shapes along the side like something pressed into the skin before birth, almost avian in symmetry, like feather sheaths that hadn't grown. They shimmered faintly, not metallic but cool. Marla gently drew the towel back around it. In the hallway, a floorboard creaked, not from her. She stilled, listening. Nothing followed. No footsteps, no wind. Just the weight of an old house remembering how to groan, but the dogs in the laundry room didn't react. Blue lifted her head slightly, ears turning, then lowered it again. Still, Marla stood. She didn't know why. She took the lamp in one hand, the pup held close to her chest, and stepped out into the hallway. The boards beneath her feet were warm from the day's heat, still trapped in the wood. The farmhouse smelled of sage and linseed oil and something, older something from the foundation itself, where the ground had been broken long before she'd ever lived here. She moved toward the back door, not for fresh air, not for a walk, just to see outside. The fields were silver with moonlight. The tree line beyond the fence shimmered with heat still rising from the ground. Insects clicked and whispered along the porch, but it was too quiet for this time of night. No owls, no frogs, no hum of crickets. She stepped out onto the porch. The pup shifted again, nosing into the crease of her arm. A soft sound rose from its throat, not distress, not exactly, but alertness. Then Marla heard it. A rustle at the edge of the field, low to the ground, deliberate. She turned the lamp slightly. The light reached only partway across the dry grass before it dissolved into shadow. But something was out there. Not large, not loud, but sure of its path. She watched, breath held. Then it stopped. Nothing moved, not the grasses, not the trees, and yet the pup in her arms tensed. Marla didn't know how she knew it, but she knew whatever was out there wasn't looking for her. It was looking for this. Behind her, Blue barked once, not loud, but sharp. The kind of bark dogs give when they want to remind someone they are not alone. Marla turned, stepped back inside, and closed the door. She didn't lock it. There was no logic in that. Not here. Not with whatever this was. She returned to the laundry room. Blue had risen again, her body angled between the pups and the rest of the space. Marla crouched slowly, laying the fourth pup in a clean dishpan lined with wool. She set it just beside the others, but not within reach, a compromise neither of them understood, but both allowed. The air had grown heavy. She reached for the lamp switch, but her hand paused. Outside, something moved across the window. Not a shadow, not a figure, just a change in the light, a flicker, like something had passed too close to the glass without touching it. Blue growled low. Marla turned off the lamp. And for the first time since her husband died, she felt it again, that thin thread between dread and duty, though knowing that something beyond reason had entered the boundary of her life, and there was no sending it back. The dark settled like a weight. No wind, no insect chorus. Even the hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen had gone still, as if the entire house were listening alongside her. Marla remained crouched in the doorway, eyes fixed on the laundry room window. She couldn't see anything outside, only the faint ghost of her own reflection in the glass. One figure inside, uncertain of what stood just beyond. Blue didn't bark again. She stood motionless beside the litter, her body a taut line of muscle and instinct. Her eyes flicked between the pups and the window, over and over. Every so often her ears twitched, catching sounds that hadn't yet arrived in the basin. The pale pup stirred. It wasn't loud, just the subtle scrape of claw against metal. The hitch of breath too strong for something so new. Marla looked down and saw it trying to right itself, not out of panic. There was no flailing, just a patient persistence. The towel had fallen aside, and the strange markings along its side caught the faint spill of light from the hallway like old bruises or dried mud, but they weren't either. She stood slowly, feeling the ache in her knees as a kind of anchor. She didn't reach for the pup, just watched. Her instincts, sharp as they'd once been, had shifted. Whatever maternal urge had guided her to shelter Blue was now tempered by a caution she couldn't explain. Something about this little life demanded care, but not closeness. Blue shifted. Her head lowered, eyes locked now not on the pup but on Marla. It wasn't aggression, not warning, just a question, and Marla had no answer. Outside, the porch creaked, not from the wind. Something stepped lightly across it once, twice, wood strained beneath the weight. Then stillness. Marla moved without thinking. She crossed the laundry room, reached into the drawer beneath the sink, and pulled out the old flashlight. It was heavy and cold in her hand, metal worn smooth in places from years of use. She checked the beam with a flick of her thumb. A weak glow. Blue made no move to follow. She stayed with the pups, her gaze never leaving the pale one. Marla stepped down the hall. The house smelled of sleep and wood, and the faint metallic trace of something forgotten. She reached the back door, turned the lock with care, and eased. It opened. The night had changed. The sky was the same silver and still, but the fields had lost their texture. The grass lay flat in patches, like something large had passed through. Not crashing, just deliberate. Marla raised the flashlight, but its beam scattered too quickly in the distance to be useful. She stepped onto the porch. It was colder now, though the air hadn't moved. The temperature had simply dropped abruptly, unnaturally. Her breath clouded in front of her. The flashlight flickered. She smacked it once against her palm, and it steadied. The beam caught the far edge of the field. Something was there. A shape, not a figure, just a suggestion. Too far to resolve, too close to ignore. Then it turned, not toward her. Not exactly, but toward the house. And though she couldn't see eyes, or a face, or even a clear outline, Marla knew the direction of its attention. A straight, invisible line drawn through the porch wood and the hallway and the basin in the laundry room drawn to the pail. Pop. The flashlight went dark. Not fizzled, not dead, it simply went dark. Marla stood there for a long time, listening. Nothing moved. No crunch of steps, no breath of breeze. Then the hairs on her arms lifted. Behind her, inside the house, Blue began to growl. Low, continuous, a sound pulled from some ancestral place. Marla turned and re-entered without looking back. She didn't slam the door. She didn't lock it. There was a futility to both. Whatever this was, it didn't need force. In the laundry room, the air was warmer, thicker. Blue stood in front of the basin now, body turned sideways, shielding the pup without touching it. Her head dipped, just slightly, in warning, but Marla didn't approach. She sank to the floor against the wall, arms resting on her knees. Her breath came shallow now, though she wasn't afraid in the way she'd once known fear. What she felt was closer to reverence, not because the thing outside was holy, but because the life inside this house was something not meant to be understood, something not meant to be possessed or protected, only witnessed. And perhaps that was her task. The pale pup let out a single sound, not a cry, but a tone. Short, low, pulsing through the wood of the floor like a signal. Blue stiffened. Marla didn't move. Outside, the porch creaked again, then a second creak, and then a third. And in the silence that followed, the pup raised its head, its eyes still sealed, and turned toward the door. The pup's head remained lifted, eyes sealed tight, body impossibly still. Blue did not growl. This time she stood as though she understood, though her body trembled slightly with effort, not fear, not resistance, just the burden of knowing something she hadn't chosen to carry. Marla didn't speak. She didn't reach for the pup, didn't soothe Blue, didn't move at all. Her hands lay open on her lap. She watched not as a witness of something strange or dangerous, but as someone finally beginning to understand the shape of what had come into her house outside. The porch gave one final creak. Then silence. No wind, no footsteps, just the long, aching quiet that comes after something important has already happened. The pup turned its head slightly, again, not toward its mother, or toward warmth, but toward the door, and stayed that way, as though waiting for something older than sound. Blue stepped back. One slow pace. Her head dropped, her tail swept low, not tucked, just lowered in quiet resignation. Then the pup stood. Unsteady at first, legs splayed like any newborn, but then, as if the trembling wasn't weakness but resistance, it steadied. Each paw moved with precision. The markings along its flank shimmered again, like frost melting into water. Marla rose only when the pup passed the threshold of the laundry room. Her movement was instinctive, not intervention, not control. She simply walked behind it, as one might trail a child walking into its own shadow for the first time. The pup paused at the back door, its sealed eyes lifted, and somehow, impossibly, it knew what to do. Marla opened the door. No fear moved through her this time. The world outside had changed, not in its shape, but in its quiet, the kind of quiet left behind when a storm passes and doesn't return. The pup stepped out onto the porch. The moon had shifted, lower now. The fields were silvered still, but the heat had gone. A fine mist had settled near the tree line, soft and slow-moving. Beyond it, nothing stirred. Then, for the first time, the pup made a sound, a low rising note, barely audible, not cry, not call, something older, something elemental. The mist along the trees drifted apart, and from the shadows stepped a shape. It was not a dog, not a coyote, not anything Marla had ever seen clearly, and yet, some part of her recognized it. Broad-shouldered, covered not in fur, but something close, something that caught moonlight but gave none back. Its eyes did not glow, they simply worked, deep and quiet and certain, that stood at the edge of the field. The pup did not hesitate. Marla watched as it walked slowly, carefully across the grass, each step deliberate, each pause exact. Its small body brushed against bent stalks without disturbing them. The larger figure did not move. It waited, patient still. When the pup reached it, there was no sound, no gesture, no show of reunion. Just a moment, long and wordless, where their bodies aligned. Then they turned, and together they walked into the mist. Marla stayed on the porch long after they vanished, not because she hoped to see more, but because the house behind her had grown heavier somehow, as though a piece of its grief had lifted and settled into her bones instead. She turned at last and stepped back inside in the laundry room. Blue lay among her 6 pups. She watched Marla enter but did not rise. Her body had relaxed, her breath was steady. She licked one of the pups absent-mindedly, her eyes soft and distant. There was no tension now, no watchfulness. Whatever burden she'd carried had passed from her, not lost, not taken, just released. Marla turned off the light. She passed through the hallway slowly, hand-brushing the wallpaper as she walked the old faded pattern of wheat stalks and sparrows her husband had once hated, and she had kept stubborn and quiet. She poured a glass of water, drank half, and set it down without sound. The house held its stillness like a hymn. Outside, the trees no longer shimmered. The mist had faded. The insects had returned, quiet, rhythmic, ordinary. She stood at the sink for a while, watching her reflection ghost in the window. Then, without thought, she reached across the sill and scratched a mark into the wood with her thumbnail, a tiny curve, no bigger than a button, beside the marks she and her husband had once carved for the dogs. They'd raised together. She didn't name it. There was no name for what had come, only the shape it left behind. In the field beyond the house, dew gathered on the grass, catching moonlight like 1,000 tiny eyes, watching, remembering, waiting for nothing at all.